Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. Today we are going to include the next 20 creature cards with a mana value of 4 into our Momir Vig Cube. What's up, MTGBC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here you are for another installment of our Momir Vig series. If you are unfamiliar with the goal of this series or just need a refresher, search in the description below for a link to the introduction to the Momir Vig variant. Additionally, found in the description below is a link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So let's get done with the talking and the intro, and let's get right to the next 20 creatures. We're going to start things off with a mono black edition, and that is Endling, a 3/3 zombie shapeshifter. So let's see, we got many abilities here to talk about with Endling. Pay a black mana, it gains Menace until end of turn. Pay a black mana, it gains Death Touch until end of turn. Pay a black mana, it gains Undying, but that will not work for the purposes of this variant because every creature summoned from the Momir Vig Cube is a token copy of the creature. So whenever it leaves the battlefield, it ceases to exist. So the third ability here for Endling is not going to do anything. And then lastly, for 1 mana, Endling gets either +1/-1 or -1/+1 until the end of turn. This is a great way to kick things off by reminding the MTGBC, be sure that your basic land libraries are filled with every possible mana that you can have, because you're going to want that black mana to activate Endling's abilities. Alright, creature number 2, we're going mono blue, and this time we're going to talk about Aeon Frolicker. We have here, come on camera, there we go, we have here a 5/5 flying elemental otter. And when it enters the battlefield, target opponent takes an extra turn after this one. Until our next turn, we and planeswalkers we control, but the planeswalkers don't matter because there are none in this variant. So we're gonna readjust the errata here and say until our next turn, we have protection from that player. This is going to be great because for the investment of 4 mana, we're getting a 5/5 flyer, okay? That's the base of this creature, because after it ETBs and the opponent takes its extra turn, we're still left with a 5/5 flyer. That is bonkers, particularly for an investment of just 4 mana. The best thing about this is that not the best thing, but the most immediate payoff of Aeon Frolicker is after it enters the battlefield, you're a target opponent, so we get to pick the opponent that takes the extra turn, and that opponent can't can't send any of their creatures at us because we have protection from that player. So we can't be targeted damage, we can't be dealt combat damage. It is just amazing. We have protection from that player. So what that really means is that one opponent is going to have the ability to inflict additional damage on our other opponents. We're left unscathed, and we end up with a 5/5 flyer. Aeon Frolicker might be one of the best 4-drops you can hope to summon from the Momir Vig Cube. Let's go back to mono black for our next edition, and we have Eradicator Valkyrie, a 4/3 Angel Berserker with flying and lifelink, the hexproof from planeswalkers. Well, that just doesn't matter for us because we don't have any planeswalkers in this format. The Eradicator Valkyrie has the boast mechanics, so we can pay 1 and a black mana and sacrifice a creature, and then each opponent will sacrifice a creature. It also forces an opponent to potentially sacrifice a planeswalker, but as we've already driven the point home so much, there are no planeswalkers in Momir Vig. We can activate the boast mechanic only if this creature attacked this turn and only once per turn. The ability to have a 4/3 with flying and lifelink, oh man, just imagine, it's an 8-point life swing if we connect with an opponent's life total every time we send Eradicator Valkyrie into battle. It has that precious evasion. In a format that's built on combat, having evasion is going to be aces. And just think, we can also, if we have a creature that is expendable and our other opponents have some creatures that are looking a little more intimidating, we can pay that boast cost, sacrifice one of our chump creatures, and have our opponents each sacrifice a creature that maybe they don't want to do. Eradicator Valkyrie is bringing some power from the 4 spot. Next up, in our first colorless edition, we have Etched Oracle. It has Sunburst, so it's going to enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Now, it does seem unlikely that the mana generated to summon Etched Oracle from the Momir Vig Cube will all come from wastes. So I think there's a very, very low probability that you'll summon a 4-drop to your side of the battlefield and it will die immediately. So let's just take that possibility right off the table. It's possible, but highly unlikely. So whatever mana you do pump into summoning Etched Oracle, it'll get a +1/+1 counter for each different color on it. So the most you're going to get is 4. Hopefully it's not 0, because if you do have those counters on Etched Oracle, you can pay a mana, remove 4 of them, and then target player draws 3 cards. Now, it also may be unlikely that you'll have 1 mana of every color siphoned through your Momir Vig Visionary Avatar. However, as we've seen throughout this series, there are a lot of ways to get +1/+1 counters on creatures in this cube. Hopefully you'll be able to do that so that you can have target player, which most likely will be you, to draw 3 cards. All right, creature number 5. We have our first multicolored edition, and it's Falkenrath Aristocrat, a 4/1 flyer with haste. So we got a big, beefy flyer. It has evasion, and it can attack as soon as it hits the field. As long as none of our opponents have any flyers or any creatures with reach, we're sending Falkenrath Aristocrat into combat the second it touches down. We can also sacrifice a creature, and Falkenrath Aristocrat will gain indestructible until end of turn. So even if we can't send it into combat, we can hold it back, and it can be a fantastic blocker as long as we still have the creatures to feed it. And as an additional bonus, if the sacrificed creature was a human, which is very possible, there are oodles of humans throughout the Momir Vig Cube, and if one of them is, we can put a +1/+1 counter on Falkenrath Aristocrat. It can go into combat and produce some big results. It can stay back as a blocker, and it can get bigger. All right, creature number 6. We have a mono red Fanatic of Mogus, a 4/2 Minotaur Shaman, and when it ETBs, it deals damage to each opponent equal to our devotion to red. And of course, devotion to red means each red mana symbol and the cost of permanents we control counts towards our devotion. So minimally, this is going to touch down on our side of the battlefield and at least deal 1 damage to each opponent. However, it is highly likely that there might be other red mana symbols floating around in some of those other creatures, making Fanatic of Mogus a pretty powerful way to deal direct damage to our opponents in a format that's geared almost entirely towards combat. All right, we got a string of mono red creatures here and another Minotaur Shaman. This one is Fellhide Spiritbinder. It's a 3/4, and it has the Inspired mechanic. Whenever it becomes untapped, we may pay 1 and a red mana. Here's another point in the video where I say, MTG BC, make sure you've got those red mana sources in your basic land library. If we do pay the 1 and a red mana, we put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of another target creature. Except it's an enchantment. In addition to its other types, it gains haste, and it exiles at the beginning of the next end step. Notice the text here. It says you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of another target creature. It doesn't say a target creature you control. So if somebody on our opponent's battlefield has a very, very nice creature, if we can safely untap with Fellhide Spiritbinder and activate its inspired ability, we're going to get a token copy of that creature with haste until the end of turn. All right, our third straight mono red edition. This time we are going to talk about Flame Tongue Kavoo. It's a 4/2, and when it ETBs, it deals 4 damage to target creature. This is going to be as close to a straight up removal as we can possibly get. Coming down in the 4 spot, if it comes in on curve, it should be highly likely that you can pick any creature on the battlefield and end up killing it with those 4 points of damage. And our fourth straight mono red edition, we have Fledgling Dragon. It's a 2/2 dragon with flying, and we have the Threshold mechanic. Fledgling Dragon, it gets +3/+3, and then has fire breathing as long as our library has 7 or more cards in it. So let's fast forward a little bit through this game, because each time we summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube, we must discard a card from our hand. So let's say that we have 7 land cards in our graveyard. Suddenly, we have a 5/5 fire-breathing evasive dragon that only cost us 4 mana. As long as we can keep Fledgling Dragon from dying on the battlefield, it's only the matter of time until that threshold is met. Alright, and getting to creature number 10 and the halfway point of this video, we go mono green with Forgotten Ancient, a 0/3 elemental, and whenever a player casts a spell, we put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. This is just going to cost so many headaches for our opponents, because you're going to want your opponents, and our opponents are going to want to do this, they're going to want to summon that creature 1 time per turn. So if we're sitting down to a table of Momir Vig players, and there's 4 of us, one round of summoning creatures is going to put 4 +1/+1 counters on Forgotten Ancient, which then allows us to disperse those counters as we see fit. Forgotten Ancient could be one of the best 4-drops you can hope to summon in this cube. Alright, we couldn't stay away from mono red for long, so next up we have Fumiko the Lowblood, a 3/2 human samurai. It has Bushido X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. For anyone who's unfamiliar with Bushido, that means that whenever this creature is blocked or blocks, it gets +X/+X until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able. So this is going to force our opponents that are keeping any of their creatures back for defensive purposes, we're going to force them into combat and hopefully see those creatures hit the graveyard. And then, of course, become exiled because they are token copies of the creatures. Alright, we're going back with another colorless edition. This time it's Galvanic Juggernaut, a 5/5 Juggernaut that attacks each turn if able. It doesn't untap during our untap step, and whenever another creature dies, then we can untap Galvanic Juggernaut. So it's going to be highly likely that there's going to be creatures dying every single round of turns, so I wouldn't worry too much about this not being able to untap during our upkeep. During our untap step. So what we're really looking at here is a 5/5 that attacks every single turn. Unfortunate that this Juggernaut does not have indestructibility, because most of them, sometimes they usually do. Alright, next creature, we have creature number 13, and that is going to be Glenalendra Liege. It's a 2/3 fairy knight with flying. Other blue creatures we control get +1/+1. Other black creatures we control get +1/+1. So we have an evasive creature that can buff our blue and our black creatures. Another mono red edition, and this time it is Goblin Goon, a 6/6 goblin mutant. It can't attack unless you control more creatures than defending player. It can't block unless you control more creatures than attacking player. So this is going to cause a little bit of, let's say, combat headaches for us, and most likely for our opponents, because we are getting a 6/6 for the investment of just 4 mana. And as long as the stars align and the numbers of creatures on battlefields, both on our side and our opponents, if it works out, Goblin Goon could steal the show. Creature number 15, our first mono-white edition, we have Gold Knight Commander, a 2/2 human cleric soldier. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. In a format that's governed by combat, any kind of combat advantages is going to be looked at as highly favorable, even if they're temporary +1/+1 power and toughness boosts to an entire squad of creatures. Staying with mono white, we are going to go with the Graceful Antelope, a 1/4 antelope with Plains Walk. That means that if it attacks an opponent that has a plains, it's going to walk right over and tick down their life total by 1 point. Can't be blocked if it has Planeswalk. Whenever Graceful Antelope deals combat damage to a player, we may have target land become a Plains until Graceful Antelope leaves play. Now, for the purposes of summoning creatures from the Momir Vig Cube, that's not that big of a deal because it's just mana channeling into our avatar. However, for the purposes of any abilities of those creatures that might be activated with those specific color-producing lands, changing a mountain into a plains, denying our opponents the possibility of fire-breathing one of their creatures, that could be the difference between winning and losing in Momir Vig. All right, we're down to 4 creatures, and it's another colorless edition. This time it is Grape Shot Catapult. We're going old school here with this 2/3 artifact creature. We can tap it to deal 1 damage to target flying creature. So if any of our evasive creatures that our opponents control have a toughness of 1, we can turn Grape Shot Catapult sideways and send that creature to its death. All right, creature number 18, we have Grinning Demon, a 6/6 demon that reads at the beginning of our upkeep, we lose 2 life. Remember, not every creature in the Momir Vig Cube is uber powerful or extraordinarily helpful. However, getting a 6/6 for the investment of 4, granted it doesn't have any type of evasion, well, it could just be a ticking time bomb, hoping that anyway, you could get that creature off of your side of the battlefield. All right, number 19, another mono black edition, and this time we're going to talk about Hailstorm Valkyrie, a 2/2 snow angel wizard. It has flying, it has trample, and if you pay 2 snow mana, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Another important highlight, make sure your basic land deck has plenty of snow sources. You want to be able to generate that snow mana, particularly for a creature like Hailstorm Valkyrie that has evasion in the flying, has trample. You can jack that power and toughness up and end up winning that game in no time, but you need the snow mana to do it. And lastly, creature number 20 is going to be another multicolored edition, and this time it's going to be Haktos the Unscarred, a 6/1 human warrior. It attacks each combat if able, and when it enters the battlefield, choose 2, 3, or 4 at random. Haktos has protection from each converted mana cost other than the chosen number. So this is going to be a strictly what do our opponents have on the battlefield under their control. And if it works out that Haktos can be sent in and not have to worry about any combat damage being dealt to it, it's going to send our opponents down in their life total 25% each time it successfully hits. Those creatures that have protection, the creatures that have evasion, those are the creatures that are going to win the game in Momir Vig. And there you have it, MTG BC. That is another 20 creature cards in our Momir Vig Cube. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.